Thanks everybody for joining us. And now it's my great pleasure to hand over and introduce to you Dr. Sandra Duncan. Welcome, Sandra.
Well, thank you. It's such great fun to be with you today for this extremely quick presentation. It was a challenge to get everything condensed into the short time that I have with you today. The presentation is called Conquering the Chaos of Cluttered Walls. So here on your screen, you see a bowerbird. And you might be very, very confused because you might be thinking, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for a nature course. I signed up for something about environments. But actually, this beautiful, tiny bird is going to be teaching us several lessons about conquering the chaos of cluttered walls. What you're going to find is this bowerbird. I don't know if you know anything about the bowerbird, but the bowerbird is an amazing architect and also a designer. As you can see from this image, this is his bower or his nest. And some bowerbirds' nests can range as long or as wide as 4 feet to several feet high. So imagine the architectural skills that this bowerbird has to create his bower. In addition to being an architect, the bowerbird is also an amazing, surprisingly amazing designer. Bet you didn't know that, did you? The bowerbird designer goes to these extreme lengths to decorate and design his bower. He spends countless hours and much time and intensity in searching and finding just the right things to decorate his bower. He finds things like blue bottle caps and blue plastic straws and shiny wrappers, gum wrappers and glass pieces and tinsel and garland and yarn and all sorts of things. He flies about his neighborhood to find things to decorate his bower. Take a real closer look at another bower built by a bowerbird. Look at the intensity and the intricacy of how the bowerbird designed his bower. He collects all these objects, these loose parts, and he categorizes them and classifies them and puts them according to size or color or shape or whatever. But he's very, very, very intentional about how he designs his bower. He's very purposeful about how he designs that bower. You can see that there is no chaos in this bird's environment. And that's exactly what we need to be doing when designing the walls in our learning environments. Eliminate chaos. That sounds easy, doesn't it? But it's really not. Interestingly enough, this bird can teach us a few lessons about chaos and eliminating chaos in our environments. Let's see what those lessons might be from the bowerbird. Lesson 1 is to be intentional. Think about the wall space in your play spaces right now. What's on them? How did you decide what to put on them? Was there intention in everything that you posted on the walls? With the bowerbird, each object was purposely found and intentionally displayed. Each object has a purpose and a place in the entire design of the bower. The male bowerbird decorates his nest for the purpose of attracting females to his habitat. The same should be true about designing your environment walls. Even though your walls have no tongue, no mouth, no teeth, they are able to convey messages to young children without uttering a single word. These messages could be good and maybe not so good messages. Walls talk to our children, even though they have no mouths. Just like the bowerbird, you can use your physical surroundings for inspiration for wall decor. Think about how the bowerbird flies about his environment and collects all those loose parts to design his habitat. One of the ways that you could begin is you could select colors from the geography, the topography, the flora, the fauna. If you live by the ocean, for example, you could perhaps select wall colors that are palettes of blue. If you live in Africa, and I just learned about this new bird, just learned about this new bird. It's a carmine bee eater, and I believe he comes from Africa, actually a northern carmine bee eater. And look at his beautiful colors. If you live in Africa and live near where this bird lives, you might use that as inspiration for your wall color. Color palettes can also be aligned with cultural diversity and culture also. So when you're thinking about eliminating the chaos of your wall, think about the colors that you paint your wall and try to embrace the neighborhood's color palette, just like the bowerbird does. Try to embrace that in your work. Here's an example of being intentional and embracing the neighborhood flora and fauna in from the classroom. This particular project is a collaborative project, and it was flower pounding. I don't know if anybody's ever done flower pounding out there, but it is so much fun to do with young children. Even the youngest child can do flower pounding. What you do is you go out and you gather flowers and leaves and anything that seems to have something with it was pressed on or broken, it would create some flower dye and some juices from the flowers and from the leaves. You put it on the floor or on the concrete or somewhere, and you put a light layered linen cloth over it, and you pound. And what happens is the dye from the flowers comes through and bleeds through onto the cloth. This teacher was wise enough to create a collaborative flower pounding project, and it is representative of the flowers just outside her classroom door. Be sure to bring the outside in when you're thinking about your wall decor, as this particular teacher did when the children went out and gathered materials from the outside, loose parts from the outside, brought them in, attached them to a piece of burlap, a piece of wood, and on the bottom, they actually did the lacing for this, and they created this beautiful embracement of the colors and the palette of the outside and brought it into the early childhood play space environment and on the wall. So lesson number 2 is be finicky. Children's voices and stories should be told. You should hear their voices. You should hear their voices coming from the wall. You can't hear children's voices with commercial posters. Their voices aren't there. They just aren't there. So just like the bowerbird is very, very finicky when he goes around and he figures out what he wants to put to decorate his bower, so should we be finicky about what's happening in our classroom or our early play space walls. One way to accomplish this is to take everything off the wall, everything off the wall. I know that sounds like a big task, but take everything off the wall and off your bulletin boards. And now, like the bowerbird, be intentional and carefully select what items will or will not return to the walls. Use these guidelines. Simple. Decommercialize your walls. Rather than purchasing an alphabet poster, create a child-made poster, alphabet poster, with natural objects like you see here. Instead of a calendar that you buy from a catalog, make a calendar out of small tree cookies and a paint stirrer on a piece of cork. The majority of wall displays should be children's work, and very few, if any, commercially purchased materials, posters, charts, or cutesy cartoon figures should be on the wall. And my favorite idea is displays should depict real life and real life events that happen in the classroom with children in the classroom. And this teacher took pictures of a child throughout the hand washing process, how you wash your hands. She then framed those images in dollar store frames and had a bamboo pole that she attached the images to, and she placed that entire display right above the sink. Far better than a commercial poster about how to handle and wash your hands. Far better. The children's voices and their stories were on the wall. My favorite idea is from Kids Country and Chris Burkholder in Ohio. In every one of her classrooms, she has beautiful black and white, humongous images of children who actually live in that space. These pictures are children experiencing events and activities in the classroom or in the play space. The images are changed out very frequently, so every child is represented at one time or another. So if you have rules, and I know that there are rules out there about, oh, you must have posters that represent diversity, diversity, worldwide diversity, global diversity, whatever kind of diversity that you must represent, why go to a commercial poster? Why go to a catalog and buy images of children that are of different nationalities? Just look to your teacher or your children. You'll be able to find significant uniqueness and significant diversities. This is a beautiful way to let children's voices and their stories be heard. And lesson 2 in Be Finicky, the number one question is when you're about ready to post something on your classroom wall, you look at it and you say to yourself, would I hang this picture, this child's piece of artwork in my home the way it is right now? If the answer is no, then you better reevaluate what you're doing with that child's piece of work. Could you frame it? Could you mat it? Could you display it in a unique way? What could you do? So the question is always, when you're about ready to hang up children's artwork or children's work, you say to yourself, would I hang it up in my home? If the answer is yes, go ahead and put it up on your play space walls. Remember how the bowerbird methodically organized the chaos by categorizing those found objects and taking great pains to make sure that they were all in the right place? He was being like a museum curator. He was cherishing and honoring, and museum curators personally decide exactly where that beautiful piece of artwork is going to go. It depends on where the sunlight is coming into the gallery. It depends on the height. He curates those precious pieces of art. And so should we be curators of children's precious pieces of work. We must honor and cherish our children's work. We must be the guardian of children's precious work. Be a curator. Display their work in unusual ways, but consciously and intentionally display the work. Like you see here in this image, where the teacher has provided a clipboard for every single child. and every single child gets to put their artwork up on that clipboard. Remember about the framing and being the guardian of children's work. Although this artwork is not on the wall, it's a perfect example of being guardian of artwork. The child has drawn some marigolds, has even written the word marigolds. And what did the teacher do? She intentionally framed it, beautifully framed it, and propped it against some real marigolds that were planted in the classroom. Display children's artwork in unique ways. Like this is one of my favorite ways of displaying children's artwork. It's a pant holder, and you can actually find them at the dollar store nowadays. And all you do is you just open up the pant holder, put the piece of artwork in, push it back together, and hang it up. In this case, it wasn't on the wall, but it was hanging from a limb that was hanging from the ceiling. Lesson number 4, and this is the last lesson, is to create active walls, active play space walls. I learned when I was researching for this particular presentation that commercial walls silence children's voices. I thought, wow, that's profound to me. Chaotic walls that are filled with commercial posters and cutesy things and primary colors and alphabet charts that are commercial, those silence children's voices. Children have no voice in something that you bought from a catalog. They have no voice in it. So what we want to do is we want not to have chaotic walls, but we want to have interactive walls where children can interactive walls that invite discovery and learning. And by interactive walls, I'm right now referring to what's called vertical learning spaces. If you're interested in this idea, I wrote an article for Community Playthings, and you can go to their website and you can look up, I think it's called something about vertical learning spaces. So it's time to start thinking not about your walls as a place to post things. Just kind of get rid of that idea. It's not a place to post stuff. What really it should be is a place for children to interact. In this case, the vertical learning wall was a Christmas tree. I think it was like a platter for food. And the teacher actually stuck it to the wall and provided a book about trees and some small miniature trees and some birds and some acorns and pine cones and all sorts of things where children could interact with that learning space, interact with that vertical learning space, and create their own stories. So you can see very easily how stories come alive from the walls when you entertain the idea of vertical learning spaces. Here's another idea, is baking pans just screwed to the wall with puzzle pieces that the teacher had lost some of the pieces. And so she turned it into this magnetic board that was on the wall. She added a book about farm animals and some puppets, and it became this interactive vertical space. There's all sorts of benefits of interactive vertical spaces. And if you want to learn about them, go read that article, proprioception, left to right, cross midline, all sorts of things that are interesting. Here's another idea. This is, you would probably recognize this as hose vents for a dryer, and just attach them to the wall and add a basket of balls, and you've got a great interactive experience for especially young children. So, not sure where I'm at in time, but I think I'm good. My challenge for you is to be a bowerbird. Be a bowerbird. Think about some of the things and ideas I've offered to you today, and good luck. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Sandra. That was really, I noted down there your quote there, chaotic walls silence children. I had never considered that before, and that was really incredibly thought-provoking. Really?
I actually have, in a few other slides, I have some research about all of that, but I didn't think I would have time, so I didn't add it. It's actually in the presentation. I might want to, maybe I will include this in the in my Enspirement lookbook. So you can go to enspirement.co and look up a lookbook, and you'll get some other ideas. And there's some research that's in some of those slides that you might be able to take advantage of.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. All right, well, I'll make sure that I share that link to Sandra in the follow-up email and in the digital classroom for people to access as well. There is a question here, Sandra. What solutions do you have to get stuff off the walls and at levels for children?
Do you mean things that are taped up to the walls or nailed up to the walls, or
that chaos that's on the walls? Yeah.
I'm not quite sure if I understand the question, but I would just begin. And I mean, if things have been up on the wall for a long time, it might mean that when you take them down, that you're going to remove paint or wallpaper or whatever that's been on the wall. And you may have to, revisit what's on the surface of the wall. But I think the results and the reasons why you're doing that is important. So I would just begin. I have the opportunity to go into a lot. In fact, I'm leaving, I think it's next week, for Texas, and I get to go into classrooms, and I get to work with teachers and help them revisit how their feelings and their ideas and how they design their classroom. And the number one thing that we always do before we even start, we get this clean palette and we take everything off the walls. And we also, if you're going to completely refurbish your classroom, if you want to go down this road, the best way to do that is to take everything off the walls, take all the furniture and everything out in the hall. You have to do it on a Saturday or on a weekend perhaps, but take everything out of your classroom and put it in, and then stand and look at your classroom. It will look so surprisingly different. I've had many teachers say to me, "Oh, my classroom is so small. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to do this because my classroom is so small." And the reality is the classroom is not small. It's just visually overloaded and physically cluttered with furniture. And you think it's small because you have so much stuff in it. And if you take everything out and then intentionally put back in what is important to the health and well-being and education of children, always being intentional, always being purposeful, then you're going to walk away and you're going to go, "Oh my goodness." It's like mind-blowing what you can do when you have a clean palette. So even though it might be hard to get the stuff off the wall, I think the benefit of doing that and looking at your classroom from a brand new perspective is really valuable.
I couldn't agree more. Do you know, it's almost unbelievable. I did exactly that thing with one of our teaching teams last week. We closed the centre because of COVID, and we had 4 days together as a team that they never normally get time for. And we did exactly that, Sandra. We stripped everything out. They stripped it all out and they started again. And it was the most amazing, powerful experience for that team, because one, they finally got time as a team to actually have those conversations together and talk about their intent and the philosophy and what they wanted to achieve in the space for their children. So that was massive to have that time together. But two, they were empowered and they were in the position where they were doing the work, resetting their environment, where normally it would be management or myself or somebody else would come in on a weekend and do it for them, and they have no ownership of that. So the teachers have ownership of it. a few of the teachers who weren't able to be there because they were homesick, when they came back this week, and we really, really decluttered the whole environment and pared it back, and, you know, too much equipment, too much resources, everything was clean, everything was reset with a lot less stuff. They just said it felt so peaceful when they came in. It felt so good to them. And I've asked them this week, I said to them, tell me what children are doing in there, and they said the children are so engaged.
Yes, you can breathe. I think one of the most interesting things about taking everything out and just standing there and pausing and sort of get in the middle of the classroom and just sort of breathe it in and look at all four walls and look to see, where's the sunlight coming in? What's happening with the light and shadow? Turn off the lights and see, is there sunlight that we haven't been capturing because we turn on the fluorescent lights? One of the things that I didn't talk about tonight because I didn't think I would have time is there is some research about the negativity of using laminated posters in your classroom. And laminated posters, here, do I have time to show you this one slide?
We are out of time, but one more I think would be great, Sandra.
Okay, let me show it to you. So lamination harms. So if you look at this classroom and what the research showed us, that look at this classroom and look at this image right here. The fluorescent lights are shining down, and you can see on the right side here, this laminated alphabet chart, I think it is. You can see how the glare from the from the fluorescent lights are bouncing off from that laminated poster. A researcher, I think in the UK, took children with, especially children with attention deficit disorder, and stood them in front of a wall of laminated posters. And the children with attention deficit disorders or sensory processing issues, they invariably turn their head away from the laminated posters, and the researcher theorized that it was because of the glare. They were unable to assimilate that glare into their bodies, and it was making them uncomfortable, so they turned their head. So for that very reason alone, we should be getting rid of laminated posters.
Imagine how that feels to spend all day, every day in that environment.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandra. That was just amazing food for thought. And I no doubt that people have got a lot to go away and have a think about. I'll just do one last check to see if there are any final questions. No, there aren't. So thank you so much, Sandra, for joining us today and invigorating and inspiring us. Thanks for coming, everybody. Ka kite anō whānau. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.